money. Hello everybody and welcome back to this this channel of garbage. Hi. As you can see, I'm still out touching grass, doing all those things. I've been busy since like June, basically. A bunch of birthdays happening in June, family coming over. I just got back from visiting the East Coast, seeing family over there. Was there for about like 2 weeks. Went to Pennsylvania, went to Long Island. And so just like a lot of stuff that's been going on, so I just really haven't had time to really make any videos. Also, guys, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but like I kind of have a kid now. I'm pretty busy, as you can tell from my bluey hat. I'm gonna take off my glasses because it's hard to see the screen. Anyways, let's get started with this, with everything I hated about Warhammer 40k. I think that this video is so long overdue because there was a lot of problems that I had with Warhammer 40k, and I kind of talked about it a little bit in my return video. There was like a small segment there, and I might as well just like go for the full tangent of why I ended up hating Warhammer 40k. I did branch off and do my own Warhammer 40k content and stuff with like Bricky, Demeki, John P, Raph, things like that. Created a dice check channel and it did really well. But behind the scenes, I was crying on the inside because of how awful I felt about this game. I'm not gonna lie, I did drink the Kool-Aid a little bit, as does everybody that plays Warhammer 40k. Honestly, Warhammer 40k is kind of like League of Legends in the sense of like, once you're in it, the people that are in it want to keep you in it for as long as they can, and basically they'll just like keep trying to inject you with some fucking heroin, so in that way you're like, oh, maybe it is good. And that's kind of what happened. But anyways, another PowerPoint presentation. Why do I love making PowerPoints now? I feel like I've gotten to the threshold of when I hit 30 years old of just being like, man, fuck it, I'm gonna be a freak in the sheets. So first off, let's start off with everything that I actually loved about Warhammer. Building the models, painting the models, doing all that stuff. That's probably one of my favorite things about the hobby, was being able to be creative and to be able to be like, hey, I want to make this model look like Vaporwave, and then do that, and then just like be able to do that. I want to make this thing galactic looking. Boom, I can do that. Super cool stuff. Like, I really liked building the models. I liked doing my own little customized models. Like, that was a lot of fun. And then painting them and all that stuff, like that was a great time. I enjoyed doing that a lot. In fact, I would probably do it more if like I didn't have a kid and I had the space where I could paint without my kid getting like toxic fumes on them or anything like that. I really did love that about Warhammer. It was probably my favorite part. And then also probably also the game. Like, the game was also a lot of fun. When I was playing the game and everyone was having a good time, it really is a good beer and pretzel type of game where you just go up to each other. You're like, hey, what are you doing for like 4 hours this weekend? All right, bet. Let's go play some games, throw some dice, drink a beer, eat some pretzels, suck each other's dick. Playing the game, painting the models, everything like that was a lot of fun. I am somewhat competitive, not like super competitive, but I'm like somewhat competitive. And so it was a lot of fun doing things like, it was like what my friend Kenny Boucher from Next Level Painting. By the way, if you guys want to learn how to paint really well, I highly suggest checking out Kenny Boucher. He does a great job with his paint jobs. It is fantastic. I learned everything from him, from like layering paints, how to use an airbrush effectively. Super great. Doing things like what my friend Kenny would say, where he would say, I'm trying to get the high points or trying to get the high score on my list, trying to fit as much stuff as I possibly can into my roster. Like, building an army in this game was so much fun. I would literally stay up for like 4 hours just on my phone on like Battlescribe or something. It was kind of crappy when Games Workshop was like, hey, guess what, Battlescribe, we're gonna try and take you over. And then it was like, oh my god, awful. Anytime that Games Workshop was like, we're gonna meddle in the things that doesn't need to be fixed, and we're gonna try and make it worse. That's basically GameStop's slogan. We will do our best to make this worse. It's like dealing with a manipulative relation. Anyways, okay, things I loved about Warhammer. I'm sorry. Throwing dice. I love throwing dice. That's pretty much it. It's just, like, honestly, being able to, like, especially since I had armies like the Tyranids, where I would have like literally, I would build an army where I have to throw 150 dice for like a small squad, and just being able to throw that and having a bunch of fun and being like, oh, half of them missed anyways. That was a lot of fun to me. It was great. It was a great time. I like throwing dice. I like hearing the dice hit the table. I like hearing the that was like, it's like ASMR to me. It was a lot of fun. I loved it. I also enjoyed the camaraderie of the game. Just being able to like go into a game with somebody that you don't even know, and just being able to like talk to them and communicate with them, and you're cheering and you're having fun, and you're just like, oh dude, that's a nice model when you're walking by a table, and then you're just like, how'd you do that, blah blah blah. It's a lot of fun, especially if you're a very social person, which is what I am. I'm a super social person, and so being able to have that nice camaraderie when you are playing with somebody, it's like second to none. It's like the complete opposite of going into a Call of Duty lobby. It is so much fun playing with other people. And now let's get into the things that I disliked about this hobby. The amount of useless books and magazines. This never changes. It never changes. It is so disgusting. And this is like one of the first parts that I realized about this hobby, was that when you start playing this game, the amount of useless books that you have to purchase is unfathomable. And like, you can do things where you can go on something like Telegram, or you can like find sneaky ways like Discord groups where you can find like PDFs of an army and stuff like that, and then play it off that way. Honestly, and this is coming from somebody that did play it for a very long amount of time, having a book is so much easier when you're trying to search through your rules. And it's a lot easier to debate with somebody on, no, I'm right. This is how it's written in this book. This is how it's written in the errata and all this stuff like that. So you have to be on top of these books. And like, you're really only paying for like a small portion of them, and the rest of the book is like whatever. But there are countless rule books, codices, and supplements that you need to purchase. You have to buy the core rule book, which is already like $60 or something like that. Then you have to buy your codex. And then your codex, it costs like around like $40 or something like that. And then you have to buy any supplements that go along with it. So like, if there's any updates, right? Because this isn't like a video game where it automatically updates it for you and you can see it online and you can see all your updates. You have to actually buy a book to see the supplements, see the new cost points, see the new, how much a new unit costs, or how much a unit has been changed, and like looking at the erratas, looking at different magazines. For example, when I was playing Tyrannus before they got their 9th edition codex, I was carrying around 4 different books. Same thing with like Harlequins. I was carrying around like 3 different books. It was ridiculous how much I had to spend on just books. So like, if you have one army, you know, and for me, I had like 3 or 4 different armies because I was running a dice check channel, or I was running the dice check channel. And so I had a lot of books I had to buy. So like, whenever there was an update, it wasn't just $40 for a book. It was, let's say that you have to buy the codex and 2 supplements plus a magazine, right? Which is the White Dwarf. $120 just right there, and just books. And the worst part of it is that probably in 6 months, most of the stuff in that book is going to be useless. And that's because of the frequent updates that happen for these books, for these armies. Because it's not all online, and because it's all being printed onto a book, it is a lot harder to keep up with your frequent updates. And so you have to spend money in order to get the information that you need. And you can do things by like, you can switch, you cannot pay for things like your battle tomes, or like where you get your missions from. You can not pay for that. And then you can just get that online, because usually people are going to be using an app like ITC Battles, and then using that in order to find like what their map deployment is like. You can also skip on seeing the CP costs and just going online and trying to find it there. You can find ways to spend less money, but that doesn't defeat the purpose. That's like saying, oh yeah, I'm addicted to heroin, but like the cost is so much, so I don't really want to pay anymore for heroin. And then someone comes in and says, yeah, well, like you can also skimp on not paying too much on heroin by just reusing needles. Like, that's like, it doesn't make sense to me. The overall problem is how much money you have to spend in just books. This isn't in models even. This is like $100 that you have to spend in just books and magazines. And books become obsolete with new editions. They immediately do. I know that in the newest edition, they had an index, which kind of fixes that. But for me, I was going through 8th and 9th edition for about the better use of like 3 to 4 years. And during that time, books became obsolete very, very quickly. There were rules that became obsolete very, very quickly. And because books become obsolete with new editions, what happens is that armies that you have or units that you have also become obsolete, and then you never touch them again. So then it's like, wow, I have these models that like I'm trying to min-max the usefulness of these models because they're so freaking expensive. Let me buy this. This will be a good min-max. Oh wait, in like 6 months, all of a sudden, and this isn't like counting in how much time you have to spend in order to build the models, in order to paint the models, get them battle ready, all that stuff, unless you're just playing in a garage and you're just like, oh, we don't have to paint our models. Everyone's gonna paint their models. Like no one wants to play with plastic, like unpainted models. It's not fun. But you do all this stuff, and then like you get 3 months out of playing this unit, and then like they become obsolete, and then you never touch them again. And that feels bad. That just feels like a waste of money. Like if a unit, like if a box costs $60 for a unit, and let's say that usually they'll box these things like you need 10 in a unit, but this box only comes with 7. So then you have to buy 2 boxes. So it's not really just $30 or $60 or $40 on just one unit. You're spending like $80 on one unit, right? And then to have that be useless in a couple of months is like, it kind of feels like crud. At least when you buy a video game that costs $60, no matter what happens, if the game is no longer updated, whatever, down the road, 3, 4, 5, 6 years later, you can still pick up that game and play that game like you played it when you were younger. It will always be there, and it will always play the same. With this, it doesn't matter. There can be updates to a book, which then makes a unit bad, which then means that that unit no longer becomes useful, or in the worst case, it becomes eroded, or it becomes no longer available in the books, and now you can never use them again. So you have to make redundant purchases to stay current. And I know that this is only on books and magazines, but like it just goes deeper and deeper from here. And so like you have to redundantly purchase the same stuff over and over again in order to stay current inside of the game. And I know that there are some people that are like, oh, well, you don't have to play by the rules of the game. Well, actually, you kind of do, because when you are playing in something that is tournament ready or tournament valid, in those missions, it is equal. It is even. If you're doing a narrative, sure, maybe you can do that. But playing a narrative all the time isn't all that great. Sometimes you don't have time to do an entire narrative. Sometimes you just want to play a game and just be like, all right, even footing, let's just play. Let's play our armies and stuff like that. And that is the most balanced way that you can do it, is to do tournament ready maps, tournament ready rules, scoring, and all that stuff. That's like the most balanced way that you can play this game and have fun with your friends while still playing with the units that you want to play with and letting your opponent play with units that they want to play with, for the most part. And so you have to make these redundant purchases in order to always stay current, which means that like you're just constantly spending money. I think that when I was playing Warhammer, every single month, I was spending like at least $500 just to stay current in this game. And that's through books, that's through magazines, that's through army units, that's through painting, that's through buying terrain, things like that, mats, freaking building everything, like not even putting in the countless amount of hours that I had to spend just to build the models as well. And so you have all this stuff, and so you can kind of see like where this trouble starts happening, where you have all these essential rules that you need scattered across multiple publications. You have rules inside of your core rule book, but then you have erratas on the internet, which is like their FAQs that they change about things. Then you have to keep track of that. Then you have to keep track of your CP, how much a unit costs, your CP costs. You have to keep track of that. You have to then keep track of other essential rules, like any supplements that you need to get. Like when I was playing Tyranids and then Crusher Stampede came out, I had to get a new I had to get the White Dwarf magazine that had the rules inside of it, instead of a freaking magazine. Same thing with Harlequins, had to do the same thing. Had to do the same thing with like even Grey Knights having a supplement. All these different rules scattered across different publications, and it's not like this game automatically updates you when something changes. You have to be in the know. You have to invest so much time into this game in order to play it that it becomes very overwhelming, or not overwhelming, it takes up a lot of your time. And then like that's where one of the biggest problems is that it suffocates you and makes you live inside of this vortex of having to constantly stay up to date all the time with information. And because you're playing with other people, you have to also know their information. You have to know what they do. You have to know what their army does, and you have to keep track of that as well. You can't just keep track of your own stuff. You have to keep track of another person as well, especially if you're going to tournaments, especially if you're playing with other people. Like, you compare this with other games that consolidate their rules into a single space that you can find. You look at something like League of Legends, and you can see like all the rules on their update page, and like it just automatically informs you like what's going on. Instead of doing that, it's like the company is 50-50. They're like 50%, they're like, we want to sell these books, and then the other 50% is let's keep it online. And so if they want to make money, they're going to sell these books, and they're not going to stop selling these books until people stop buying them. If people keep buying these books and keep buying these codices and keep buying these supplements, then the company's gonna keep doing it because that's how they make money. And you know what? In fact, I'm pretty sure that even if you stop buying it, that will make them double down, and then they'll still make these books even more, because what they're trying to bank on are the whales of this game. That's all that they're really trying to do. They're trying to keep the whales interested inside of this game so then they can keep siphoning them for money. So you have a cost of enjoyment. There's a high cost of individual models and units. We already both know that. I've talked about it in the documentaries that I've made about it. There's a high cost of individual models and units, and it's expensive. It gets so expensive. And you can do things like buying proxies, but then depending on where you go, proxies might not be okay. You can do things like 3D printing, but then now that tournaments are more catered towards Games Workshop, and Games Workshop is like, hey, this is now the Games Workshop tournament officially for Warhammer. You can't bring your 3D printed models there. And I did things where I would buy, what's it called? Recasts across the seas in frickin' China, so then I can get models from there, because it became so expensive, especially when I was running Dice Check and there were so many models that we had to buy. It was literally insane how much money I would have to spend with everybody in order to even make things. And then that's not including also your terrain. There's so much cost of enjoyment that you have to spend up front in this game that makes it so hard to even get started. And then once you get started, then you have to pay the most expensive thing in the world, which is your time. And you have to spend that time in order to make these models, build them, paint them, and then play them. And playing a game is like 4 to 5 hours. And then there's also even special edition and rare models priced even higher. So like, for example, I wanted Biovores. I love this whole Spore Mines thing and being able to trap people places. And it was one of the most fun things I've ever done, and I did that in 8th edition. And I saw that, Biovores were good again, were actually very, very good because of the new rules that they had for Spore Mines. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can use my Biovores now, and they'd be fantastic. They were so expensive. Like one model costed like $35 or something like that. And then like they weren't even printed anymore. So I had to proxy them with Pyrovores, or I had to like convert Pyrovores into Biovores, or do something like that, because they were they weren't plastic, they were resin, and so they were even more expensive. And so getting things like that was annoying. And there's always a constant stream of new models and expansions. Like, for example, by the time I was done with Warhammer 40,000, I saw that they brought out new models for Termagants and Hormagaunts. And it's like, people were asking, are you going to get the new models for them? And I'm just like, bro, for Tyranids, I literally have 200 Termagants. Why in the fuck am I going to spend more money in order to do that whole process to get 200 more Termagants again, or Hormagaunts? Like, it doesn't make sense. And they're bigger models now. So like, if you want to play that certain model, you need to go to that new updated model. You have to update their bases. You have to update what the model looks like, because they look differently. So they're going to stick out of places more. So it's like, it's so freaking annoying how much you have to spend on new models and expansions, and they trick you, and they're just like, look at this new model. Whoa, look at these new things that you can get. Isn't this cool? Look at this. Like, isn't this fun? Don't you want this? And it's like, bro, I would, like, 5 years ago, but like now, I kind of don't want to spend $200 to $300 on new models when I already have them. So you have this constant pressure to keep up with the latest releases of things, not just in rules, but also in models, and then also in game styles, different ways to play the game, different terrain, different play mats, different sizes of tables. You have to constantly keep up with the latest releases, and it's just so exhausting. And like one of the things that pissed me off the most was that I loved Monster Mash. I loved making like really big list where it was just like 6 or 7 monsters on the table, and I'm just like, let's go have fun and do this whole thing. And I bought 2 Democarians, and then Crusher Stampede came out, and then they became so strong, and I'm like, oh man, I also want to try this sized Hyrule. It's from Forge World, so I have to get it from a different way. Oh, what about the Harridan? I have to get it from a different way. And like those things cost so much freaking money, man. Like, it's so expensive buying these things, and then once the new book came out, I couldn't even use those models to their full potential anymore. Like, I had to shelve them, so I just wasted like $200, $100, whatever, how much it was on these models, and then all of a sudden I can't play them anymore. And you can play the whole, oh, well, you could have just 3D printed them. Not everybody has a 3D printer. Not only that, but their STLs can be somewhat hard, and then like, it could take a while to print it, and then maybe it doesn't even work right or something like that. You can't just solve problems by just being like, well, you could just 3D print it. Again, the whole heroin analogy. Oh, well, you can make it cheaper by reusing needles. Like, that's not the point. The point is that Games Workshop pushes so much stuff onto you that you have to pay for that makes it so freaking upsetting to play the game. Like, you want to love this game, you want to have a great time with it, but Games Workshop is constantly punching down on the people that play the game, that it makes it difficult to like to really truly love and enjoy the game. You have costs of paints and brushes and modeling tools. Things like paints aren't very cheap, especially if you're doing things like inking or stuff like that. You have to always buy new paints, you have to always buy new brushes, basing paints, and then you have to buy your terrain and your gaming mats, especially if you're playing at home. If you're playing like with yourselves, and everyone should be playing with yourselves, but like if you are playing with your friends inside of your garage, you have to buy terrain, you have to buy gaming mats, you have to buy multiple gaming mats because you can't just keep playing on the same gaming mat. You have to buy multiple pieces of terrain, so then you're not always playing with the same type of terrain all the time. And then you have entry fees for tournaments and events, like a ticket to like a Warhammer event. It's like $100, right? And that's not putting into account also the price of a hotel. That's not putting into account the price of travel. That's not putting into account the price of food that you have to spend when you're there. There's a lot of money that you have to invest in order to even enjoy the game to its full potential. And like a lot of places, they're like, oh, we don't want you to be bunking with the same person or bunking with like a couple of guys. We want you to have your own hotel rooms. Like, fuck off already. The event already costs like $100 for a basic like ticket to get into the game in order to even play, and you're telling me I have to pay $300 per night in order to also stay there? Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Like, shut up. And then we got power creep. Woo-wee. When I was playing, man, was there a bunch of power creep. And I drank the Kool-Aid. Like, you can even look at the Dice Check channel. There were like podcasts where we're just like, is there really a power creep? And I was like, no, there isn't really a power creep. Until it got so bad that there was a very obvious power creep. Like, it got so bad during 9th edition that, like, I literally couldn't play the armies that I enjoyed. There was an imbalance in game mechanics constantly. Like, when Tyranids came out, when the new book for Tyranids came out, holy shit. Like, they were so overpowered, I couldn't even play my army without feeling terrible. I couldn't play my army with anybody. Even when I made a bad list, like a really bad list, it would still dominate because there was just so many tools that I had. You take that codex and you compare it to something that released in the very beginning like Space Marines, and it's so obviously overpowered. and there were so many imbalances in game mechanics. Like Tyranids were so overpowered I couldn't play them without feeling bad. Harlequins were so overpowered when they first released in this new edition, or in 9th edition, that I felt bad playing them. I felt bad playing Slanesh after a while. I felt bad playing like Chaos Demons. I felt bad playing like any of the armies that I enjoyed playing, even like Grey Knights. All 4 of those armies that I had were so overpowered. It was upsetting to play these games because they were so imbalanced. Like the game would literally last 1 round and then my opponent would give up, and it sucked. It really sucked. It took all of the fun of this game and tossed it out the window. And then like constantly you have newer models and units being so overpowered. Like what is it, Eradicators. When Eradicators came out, so overpowered. They would just nuke something so fast, and it was just so annoying to have to deal with because there's nothing you can do about them because they are so overpowered. And that's what they kind of do a lot. And so there's a frustration with constant rebalancing of the game where they'll go through like a month or 3 months of having the same rules, and then they'll change it, and then you have to like pray to the gods whether they're going to actually fix it or they're going to put a band-aid on it, and then it's just like a little bit better, but really it's not. And so there was such a huge amount of power creep in this freaking thing. Like Harlequins, it went from, they had they had the gift from the laughing god, which was like you get to reroll a saving throw or something like that. And it was cool. Like it was a cool mechanic that was very specific to Harlequins, and it made sense, and I was like, man, this is really cool, but it was so overpowered. And so what they did was they kept knocking it down and down and down until eventually it became basically useless. And then like that mechanic is gone. And like this was already off of Harlequins going from a single book from by themselves in 8th edition to them being consolidated into its into the Aldari book. And then from there, like a lot of their rules and a lot of the stuff that made them cool was like kind of stripped away from them. And then it became like you can only run them in a certain way. You have to run them in a certain way. If you don't run them in a certain way, then you're going to lose. And it made you feel bad. So let's talk about loss of enjoyment when something is OP. And you feel this with anything. When you're playing a video game, when you're playing this game, whenever you go up against something that is extremely overpowered and you can tell that it's overpowered, it's just not fun playing against it because there's nothing you can do. Overpowered armies create such an uneven playing field, and you have to stick there and play this game for like 4 or 5 hours, even though you know that by the first round you're fucked and there's nothing you can do about it. It's like playing Yu-Gi-Oh at this point, right? Where you go into a game and then on the first turn you know whether or not you've lost, or like you already get OTK'd. It's the same shit. Like this makes it so uneven when an army is overpowered. And the dominance of certain armies reduces diversity in game experiences. The diversity in your game was so small because because the dominant overpowered armies took over everything. And like the army lists were basically the same all the time. Like Tyranids, 2 Harridans or 1 Harridan, Gargoyles, a Winged Hive Tyrant or a Walking Hive Tyrant, and then some little creatures to go do your bidding in order to go grab points. And that was basically how the game was played. And it sucked, and it was boring, and it wasn't fun, and I felt bad whenever I played Tyranids, even if I brought like a non-conventional list, and it felt like crud all the time. And then matches become less exciting and more predictable. Like in this game, we said that round 3 was the backbreaker turn. Round 3 was the turn where the game is decided on who is going to win and who is going to lose, and you have to decide how many points can you get out of this game to squeeze out in order to not make the loss so detrimental to you. But when 9th edition came out, it became more like round 2 was the backbreaker turn because it was so alpha strike heavy, and then it became beta strike heavy or whatever. Like round 2 was very, very pivotal to a game, and round 1 doesn't really take that long. Round 2 probably takes like the longest, and that's when you decide, oh, okay, I'm fucked. Or I'm not fucked, something like that. And so there was a lot of frustration among players facing overpowered armies. Imagine having to go up against something and like it is immediate on whether or not you're going to win or you're going to lose. Like, you put your Necrons on a table. Remember, like, 9th edition started off with Necrons and Space Marines, and Necrons are cool. And then Necrons came out, and then you put up Necrons to Tyranids in 9th edition. There's no game there. There's literally no game there. Like, there's nothing that Necrons can do that can fight off the Tyranids player unless the Tyranids player is dumb fuck stupid. That's the only time it works. If you're smarter than your opponent by leagues, then yeah, you can win it. Like anything, like you can always outsmart somebody. But if they're playing and they're like at the same mindset as you and they're just as smart as you, or like, you know, they're playing the same level as you, you're going to get fucked and you're going to lose, and it's going to be hard. And so that's why there was so much frustration among players who were facing overpowered armies. And because of that, there was such a huge negative impact on the overall community and player morale. And this happens every single edition, at least from what I've heard. The edition starts out really, really well, and then it ends off very, very poorly, and the player morale goes down. And that's the cycle that keeps happening with this game. I'm not going to lie. I drank the Kool-Aid, and I was like, hey, you know what? Let's look on the bright side, because that's what I thought was good. But guess what? It's not. That's just a codependency problem and a sunk cost fallacy. And I was like, it's like, oh, you lose. Oh, boo-hoo. Wah, 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 wah. But like, honestly, like, why would you always go into a game knowing that you're going to lose no matter what you do? And you can be like, yeah, I'm having fun just losing all the time because I get to do the stuff that I want to do. But then, like, there's no way that it still doesn't make you feel bad that you're losing all the time, or that you can't enjoy the game as much as somebody else is. And that's the part that kind of sucks. So there was that. Loss of enjoyment when everything's OP, limited variety in tournament play and casual games. It's probably like the same thing that you're going to see at like any video game event, like any esports event. There's like the meta characters, and you're always going to see the meta characters around. That's how it happens with everything. However, with Warhammer, it's worse because there is such a huge investment in not just money, but also in time, which leads us to time consumption. There is there's so much time that you have to spend playing this game. There is a lengthy setup and teardown. When you start playing a game, you have to go to a store and you have to reserve a spot at a game store, or have someone that you can play inside their home or whatever, right? So like, let's say that you have to reserve a spot at a game store. You go to the game store, you have to get there like 10 minutes early, 15 minutes early. So then that way you can get there. Then you start setting up the game. You have to then wait for your friend to come by to play it. You have to set up the terrain. Then you have to be like, all right, now that terrain is kind of set up, let's roll for the mission. You roll for the mission together. You're like, okay, you set up your deployment zone. You do all that stuff. And then you have to make like a line of dice in order to make the deployment zone. And then from there, then you could do something where it's either you rearrange the terrain, or maybe you do the FLG thing where you take turns placing down terrain. And then from there, then you can finally start putting down your models, and then you have to go back and forth to put down your freaking models, and then you do all that stuff. It's probably going to take you like 20 to 30 minutes to just get started, if like at the same time you're also talking to your opponent and like being a good friend and just like having a good time, being like, hey, do you want a pizza? I'm gonna go grab a slice. Or hey, I'm gonna go get something to drink. Do you want something? It's gonna take like 30 minutes, and then you play the first round that takes like 15 minutes. And then the second round, it takes another 15 minutes, and then you're fucked. And it's like, Jesus Christ. And then you have to tear everything down, pack everything up. You have to take your models out as well. There's hours, and it takes such a long time to play this freaking game, and you're going to be playing for like 4 or 5 hours if you're going to play the full 5 rounds. Then there's the hours spent on painting and assembly, and you are going to be constantly painting and constantly assembling new models. It is a constant thing. You aren't just going to stop one day and be like, I no longer have to do it anymore. Unless you buy every single model inside of your army and paint them all and get them all done, so then you don't have to think about it anymore, and then you're just like, I'm done. I no longer have to buy an army anymore. I'm just sticking with this one, and that's it. Then sure. But it's still going to take you a long time. You're still going to have to constantly paint and assemble things, because there's things that you want to do. Like there's different ways that you want to build a unit. There's different ways that you want to build an army. And so you have to constantly do that over and over again. It's hard to have this hobby of Warhammer and still have another hobby as well. And it's hard to split that because there's so much that has to occupy your brain when it comes to this game. It's not just the amount of money that you're spending, it's the amount of time that you have to invest in this game as well. Like when I was playing that, I couldn't do things like make films. I couldn't do things like read books because I have to read all this other stuff. I have to get ready for my game this weekend. I have to do this. I have to paint this. I have to build this. Like there's so much crud that you have to do with this game that it's hard to like just constantly not think about it all the time. And there we go, my friends. That is all the reasons why I don't like Warhammer 40,000, why I hated the game, and why after a while I was just like, I'm not playing this game anymore, and I just don't care. That's why. Basically, I stopped drinking the Kool-Aid, and I was like, I ain't doing this no more. I'm done. This is the last straw. I'm not playing this fucking game anymore. Oh, 10th edition is going to come out. Kiss my nuts, Games Workshop. Like, this company, the company of Games Workshop is such a cesspool, and it's so sad because the IP is good, but everything that Games Workshop does, it just like they just shit on anybody that cares about the game, and they feel like the hobby is like null and void, or like they can do whatever they want with the hobby and people will buy it. And that's basically the truth. A lot of things are going to happen inside of this game because people are still going to buy the models. At the end of the day, people are still going to buy stuff from them, and that's all that they care about. And as long as they have their whales interested inside the game, then it's going to be like that forever. And that's the sad truth of it, and that's capitalism. And you can choose to go with it, or you can choose to not go with it. And I chose not to go with it because I don't care enough anymore. And I don't want to be siphoned like that. It feels gross. It feels like I'm being misused. I get this manipulation of things are going to get better, but then it never does. It's like being in a narcissistic relationship is what it's like playing this fucking game. You feel like it's going to get better, but then it just never does. And the same thing just keeps happening over and over and over again. And yeah, that is it. That's my video for today, where we just talk about things I hated about Warhammer 40,000. Another PowerPoint video, but it is cool. It's a nice little info dump for me. But yeah. Next week, I have another video coming out, so that will be very fun. Take a look out for that. It's going to be about Dungeon Dice Monsters. So hopefully I can get that done by next week, and that will be coming out next week. And I have a lot more videos that are still coming out. I just haven't had time. So thank you guys for sticking around. If you guys want me to talk about anything else, please leave a comment down below, and maybe I can do another PowerPoint presentation of something. Like, give me some things that you would want me to do a PowerPoint presentation on, even if it's something stupid like how to wash clothes. I will do that. Anyways, that is it for today. Thank you guys for watching. I truly do appreciate it. If you guys dislike this game, or you have any problems with this game, yell it into the void in the comments below, and maybe that way you'll feel better, because Games Workshop probably isn't going to change. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button, and make sure that you press the like button, and make sure that you press the bell thingy, and do whatever else it is. Goodbye.